Starting session 5. You haven't been here for ages, and I think I have one. Anybody that needs Bible sheets for lesson 5? Let me see if I got a lesson 5. You need lesson 5? Okay, let me grab it out of my thing. My cabinet. And if you would make about 5 copies. Yeah, just run it on 11 by 17. Do 5 or 6. That'll work. Okay, Karen is taking care of that. So while we're waiting for Karen to run those copies, some of you got the email about Dave. I talked to him yesterday afternoon. He called. He called, not his son, and he is improving. I think he is bored out of his skull. He was in the you didn't read the email? Yeah, he's hospitalized with pneumonia, which he got the pneumonia from his son's funeral. It was a really nasty day, and he said half the family is sick, and so anyway, but keep Dave in your prayers. But then also, if you would be so inclined, he's bored. I mean, really bored. And so if you are a phone talker, he has his cell phone with him. If you don't have his cell phone number, talk to Karen. She has his number. And give him a call. He called you? Yeah, he was having a blood transfusion when I was talking to him. And he, at the end of the conversation, he said, well, you know, you could tell people if they've got my number and they want to call. That's what I said. I think he is just bored. So he would love to hear from his friends and family down here, if you would be so inclined. If you're watching online and you don't have Dave's phone number, his cell phone number, call the office. Karen will gladly give it to you so that you can make contact with Dave and keep him happy. You know, which I mean, he's not unhappy, but he's just bored right now because I mean, sitting in the hospital, he's getting better, but he can't go and do anything. Yes, sir. Let's rent a bus. Hey, wait a minute. We've been talking about bus tours of Germany and Israel and cruises. We'll do the bus tour to Ohio. Wouldn't that just blow his mind? Hey, we could see fall colors, yes. Hey, in honor of the fall colors, I have my beautiful orange shirt on. Of course, down here we don't get the fall colors, but about now in Missouri, the beautiful fall colors on the other hill would just be, amazing. But that's all right. We palm trees don't change colors. Yeah, they go dry and brown. Okay, so we are in session 5. I think we started on day 1 last week. I'm going to just go ahead and review it. This is the last of the chapters. And Peter is coaching the people on life. Now, understand that persecution is coming under Nero. It's not here yet, but it's coming under Nero. And so Peter wants them to be ready for that. Whoops, wrong way. To the elders among you, so all you old folks, no, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's suffering, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. I'm going to move this out just a bit so I'm not in the way. The glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be. Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. Christ the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. Okay, so that's the verse. If you note in the folder or the question sheet, it talks about the term elder. And it is a confusing term. I mean, we have elders in the congregation. Is that what Paul is talking about? Is he talking about the elders like Fred and Jeff and Sammy and Don and Dan? Is that where this term goes? No. No. So parallel terms would be overseer, shepherd. Anybody got another one? He's talking to me. See, the setup is in the early church, Peter and Paul are doing mission work. Peter mainly among the Jews, Paul mainly among the Gentiles, although there is some intermingling, if you will. But Paul does work in Corinth and Philippi and Thessalonica and Ephesus, and he's got people he knows in all these different places. But he can't very well be there to care for them and to preach the word to them, right? So that's where this term comes in. And they don't really have the ordination at this point in time. They're not ordaining people, but they would raise up men from within the congregation and say, you're the elder of this congregation. In other words, you are responsible for caring for those people, for overseeing what goes on, the operation of the church, for pastoring, and it falls on you. And so when we look at the term elder, it's a different term than what we would look at. I told the elders yesterday in our elders meeting, if we look at Scripture, what term really applies to the elders? The position of elder today. The deacons. The appointment of the 7 in Acts 6. The apostles are getting a lot of heat because the widows aren't getting their fair share, and the apostles say, we're working as hard as we can to be telling the gospel and telling the story to the people. We're praying for the sick. We're praying. We need help. And so they raise up 7 individuals who they call deacons to work with those in need. Now, that was mainly in Antioch and Jerusalem. But I would imagine where these elders were, they likewise had deacons raised up. And there you get the original board of elders, if you will. However, having said all of that, is what he's about to say, does it not apply to you? It especially applies to individuals in my profession, my vocation, my lifestyle, but does it apply to the average everyday Christian? Well, let's look at that. Be shepherds of God's flock. No, that doesn't apply to you, does it? What's a shepherd do? Guards, protects, leads. He's there to keep the wolves at bay and make sure that the sheep have the necessary sustenance, right? Bind up any wounds. Try to help any of the wounded that he sees. Is there a part of that in the life of the member of the congregation? To an extent. You don't do the word and sacrament ministry necessarily, but isn't it part of our Christian life to be caretakers of our brothers? To be not supplying necessarily the sermon for their life, but to supply those words of encouragement and those words of comfort. As I said, Dave is not in any danger that I know of at this point in time. Talking with him, he's feeling fine. They're pumping the antibiotics in him. They're giving him the blood. He's doing fine. So why did I just say, if you got some time, get the number from Karen and call? Because it's a way of caring, right? We are a community of believers. We are, in essence, a family, and if we don't care about one another, what good are we? So, yeah, not completely, and yet somewhat. Not because you must, but because you are willing. Too many pastors do it because they want the power, or they want the money. It's a high-paying job, right? I don't know of anyone who does it because he must, but that willingness to serve. That is the real role. When the Lutherans come over in the 1830s, fleeing the Prussian Union under Kaiser, and the Prussian Union basically, the Kaiser said, all right, all of Germany is now reformed. There is no Lutheran, there is no Catholic, it's reformed. You will worship as I worship, period. And a lot of the Lutherans and some of the other religions said, nope, not doing it. And so they would get on boats and they'd come over, some to New York, some to Minnesota, some to Florida, some came to New Orleans and then up the river to St. Louis, our predecessors. There was a great divide within the early Lutheran church, between Leia's followers in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and Walther. The Leia group, Wilhelm Leia, took more of the authority, that the pastor is the authority in the congregation, and his will is to be followed. So if I say we want green carpet, we get green carpet. No discussion. And by the way, we'll never have green carpet. But anyway, although this does have kind of some green in it. Walther, on the other hand, looks at it more of the role of pastor is to be the chief servant in the congregation, to do everything he can to serve. And it led to a lot of difference. And there's still that difference today when we look at that. So it's not just back in the 1830s that was going on. Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those who trust you, but being examples to the flock of that life of service. Of doing all you can to help your fellow believers. And when Christ the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. At Pastor Schultz's funeral, Pastor Honnell made reference to that as shepherd, Pastor Schultz had received that crown of glory. It's not that Christians don't get that crown of glory. It's just that as pastors, there's great joy there. And so it's an honor that's given. So, all right, we're going to go into the questions. According to Peter, what qualities, either stated or implied, are desirable in a pastor? What do you think? What do you want in your pastor? I remember reading one time, congregations want a pastor to be 30 years old with 35 years experience. Neither too tall nor too short, neither too heavy nor too thin. They want him to be mild-mannered but bold in his faith. It just keeps going on, and kind of like, okay, well, you're never getting a pastor. Every pastor is different. I am not Pastor Schultz. I am not. I'm not any of my predecessors. I am who I am, and I've been who I am for 31 years. I do what I can, and you chose me. So I don't know what to say about that. But what qualities do you look for? And this is not a gripe session. You can cheat and look at your sheet at verses 1 to 4 there. You can cheat and look at that, but I'm asking you personally, what qualities are you looking for in your pastor? Preaches the word from the Bible. Humble. I am proud to say I'm the most humble man around. Oxymorons. Humble with, it's kind of like that, not forceful but bold about the gospel, yeah. Anybody else? Well, Peter talks about knowledgeable. Yeah, I would agree with that. Peter talks about watching over the flock. Peter talks about being willing to serve, not being forced to, but being willing to. And by the way, every pastor is different. There was a pastor I knew that he could not make hospital calls. If somebody went into the hospital, he would stand this is in big city, and he would stand in the lobby for almost a half an hour, almost making himself sick in order to get on that elevator and go up. And he had this something in his mind. Great pastor, but he could not make those hospital calls. He's not a pastor anymore. He was a great preacher. Taught the best Bible classes I ever sat in on. But because of that one fault, he made the decision, because he said, I just can't keep making myself sick. In my estimation, the church lost a great preacher. But so what else? Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. I never argue about my salary. Never have. What it is what it is. I agree to serve, and I serve my Lord, and whatever it is, whatever. Because it's not about the gain. Although, the Bible does talk about the worker is worthy of his hire and stuff like that. But you all know, it's not about things with me. It's not about the things I can hold in my hand. It's about the people I hold in my heart. It's about that care and concern that I can show to somebody hurting. And, to share that life. Not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples. So, in other words, putting yourself in the same shoes. Do you want to, Jeff, you said knowledgeable. Do you want to know it all? Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I study. You just keep your mouth shut because you don't know what you're talking about. I believe yesterday you used the word insightful. Yeah, and I look for that in the Bible studies I go to and such at district things. I look for those who are insightful, not know-it-alls, but they have a level of knowledge, and you just sit there going, "Where'd you get that?" And just kind of like, I love it when, and this has happened a couple of times. Somebody will come up and they'll say, I enjoyed your sermon today. This is the part I like. I never thought of that verse that way. In other words, I opened up a new dynamic on that verse to them, and they grew in their faith because of it. And that is my goal, by the way, is to lead people to that next level of knowledge of their Savior. And by the way, I don't do it in order to gain a crown. I already have the crown. I know I have the crown, and that's it. So, all right. Any other desirable qualities in your pastor? Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And there is that care and concern. Right. Sometimes that's a little harder as numbers grow. I mean, in a small congregation, you can keep in touch better. And with pandemic, it's been really, life altering. Yes. You haven't seen my crystal ball? I spy on all of you every day. It certainly helps. If you know of someone in need, I would appreciate, hey, I talked to so and so, and they might appreciate a call, or they're going through something. With the pandemic, there are people who aren't here, but I know they're online, right? Now, doesn't mean I shouldn't call them, but it's hard to keep up with everybody. There are roughly 150 families in this church, and it's hard to keep track of all of them, but I try to. And so in conversations with others, I try to glean those. It's kind of like, hey, I need to call on so-and-so. I've got a couple on my list right now that come from conversations I've had, and so I'm going to be working on calling them. But, and there's a flip side to that, too. There was a pastor that I knew that if you weren't in church on Sunday, he would be at your doorstep Monday morning saying, why weren't you there? He drove more people away from his congregation because it's kind of like, we can't skip, or he's going to show up on our doorstep embarrassing us with our neighbors, and that's not the way to do it either. But to show care and concern, and it's a very gentle and very tender routine. So, but if you know of someone, let me know. So I noted watching over them, being willing, eager to serve, being an example. All right, question 2. In 1 Timothy 3:1-7, the Apostle Paul exhorts overseers and shepherds to lead exemplary lives. Briefly note the qualities Paul lists in the following areas: personal, in regard to family, in regard to church, and in regard to believers. And I say that because I want you to be listening as I'm reading. Here is a trustworthy saying Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. He must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. What? That's more qualities. So what are the qualities in his personal, or what are the qualities that Paul exhorts in the personal life of the pastor? Let me go back a little bit. Above reproach, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. I mean, that's pretty high order. By the way, how many of you could live up to those standards? You know, pastors live in glass houses. We know that. In regard to family, first of all, faithful to his wife. And that's a hard one. I know of several pastors that when they leave the office at 5 o'clock, they turn their phone off. And they'll turn it back on at 9 o'clock in the morning when they come back into the office. Friday night, they turn their phone off, and they do not turn it back on until Monday morning. They're out of the office, and that's family time. What do you think of that? Yeah. I've had calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. In fact, I got a call at one time at 2 o'clock in the morning that a man had been taken to the hospital. He'd had a heart attack, and the family was gathered there. They didn't know if he was going to make it or not. I put clothes on and headed off to the hospital. I got there. He was still alive, but fading fast, and he ended up dying about 3:30 in the morning. You know, that pastor wouldn't have been there for them. But now their point is, wait a minute, I have to be respectful of my wife, and she needs my time. You know, I probably have dishonored my wife more than once. We've canceled probably in my 31 years, in our 27 years of being married, we've probably canceled a half a dozen or more vacations. In small rural ministry, you know, there's no one around to cover for you. And so if somebody is in intensive care and is dying, I'm not going to take a vacation to Florida because that leaves that family without coverage. And Shelley understood that. The year we got married, we moved down to a small town south of Kansas City, and we had planned a cruise. It was going to be the first cruise of my life. Arranged it through my cousin who was a travel agent. And we put the money down, and we were looking forward to that cruise. November of that year, they had two incidents with that cruise line. One, a ship broke down, and the second one, a ship ran aground. And I called my cousin. I said, should I be concerned about it? He said, I don't know, but he said, I do know this. If I call them, they will give you your full deposit back. They will not deduct from it. So if you want to back out, they'll cover you. He said it might be smart. It seems like they're having some mechanical issues. So I said, yeah, go ahead. So he called. He got my deposit back. Christmas Day, I had two congregations. We had gone to the away congregation. I came back and I walked in the door, and they told me that Huldah, that was actually the woman's name, Huldah had died through the night, and the funeral was going to be that week, right when we would have been gone. God worked it out that one. And I said, I'm sorry, Shelley, we'll make it up. Well, unfortunately, it was probably 24, 25 years before we finally got a cruise. Sorry. But, you know, I love my wife. My wife loves me. And we do enjoy our time together. She's got a busy life. I've got a busy life. And we both understand that. We make every effort to eat supper together every night and to do things on the weekend together. So, I mean, we do what we can, but she's got her teaching, and I've got the ministry here. And so sometimes she gets short shrift. Sometimes I get short shrift. You know, there are times that she comes home, she eats supper, and then she goes into the office and works on schoolwork till 9 at night and then goes to bed. Yeah, but that we understand that life. All right, so that's the first one. But then he goes on, manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. I don't have any children, so I don't have to worry about that one. But I do have nieces and nephews, and you know, trying to keep them in line. But it's about managing your family. If you're not managing your personal family, how are you going to do the church family? All right. In regard to the church, what do you think Paul's going to say? You can see the sheets. Must not be a recent convert, because he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment of the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, and that's the next one, the unbelievers. But in regard to the church, Paul doesn't really talk a lot about it in this passage. He talks in other places, but it's one of those, you love the church first. You know, you want to see the church carry on the work of Christ in the best way it can. And if it's all about me, I got the wrong target, right? And by the way, I know a lot of people come to a church or don't come to a church because of the pastor. They got the wrong target, you know. If it's about the man preaching the word, you're not hearing the word. It's about the word. And so it's not about me. But let's go back and glean a little bit more. Yeah, that's about it. To be treated as a family, and by the way, families have disputes. Families have falling outs. You know, you guys have never had a falling out with any of your family, right? Yeah, it happens. But see, it's about understanding that family is family. Blood is thicker than water. All right. So what? Oh, in regard to unbelievers. In John 21, 15 and 19, which aspects of ministry does Jesus stress? When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Now, so there's 3 times Jesus asked a question. And in English, every time it's love, right? There's 2 Greek words. And I can write anything I want up here. You won't know any different. I can tell you it means whatever I want you to think it means, and you won't know any different. Yeah, no, I don't want that. So there's four terms for love of a sort in the Bible. Two of them we really don't reference. One is gluttony, love of food. It's the love of the belly, and the other is the erotic love. But then the two we often talk about, and I don't know if these are showing up on the screen. Let me look. And of course I'm going to stand here and I can't see. Nope, they're not there. Okay, so I got to change this. Go black. See if I can go over the top of it. So agape and phileo the only difference in the love is the condition. All right, agape, is it even showing up now? Oh, yeah. Okay, we're doing good there. So agape is unconditional love. It's love no matter what. And I'm going to try zooming in a little bit more. That's better. It's unconditional love. So we talk about God. Is there anything you can do that will make God stop loving you? He loved you while you were a sinner, and what did he do? God shows his love in this. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. You could phrase it, while we were yet dead in our sins, Christ died for us. So there's nothing we can do that will cause God to stop loving us. All right? Phileo, obviously if one is unconditional, the other is conditional. So, what's the condition? The condition can be a pre-existing that when that no longer exists, then you don't love anymore, right? So, Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love. Philadelphos, right? So, Phila is brotherly love. Kind of. The condition is we're family, right? You do something that causes me to want to cut you out of the family, I'm no longer going to love you, right? I was talking to my confirmation kids. We were talking about baptism. And their assignment for the conversation on baptism was, what was your baptismal date? Who were your sponsors or godparents? Why were they your sponsors or godparents? And are they still part of your life? Are they important to your life? And one of the children, after he had said the two, I said, are they still involved in your life? He said, one, yes, the other, no. And I said, okay, so why not? Well, she was married to my uncle, and they got divorced, and once she was no longer my aunt, we don't really talk to her. See, there's a conditional love. Once the divorce happened, she's out of the family, we no longer love her. I don't know that that's particularly true, but it kind of shows the condition. Which form do you think Jesus and Peter use? Jesus, in the first two, uses agape. In the third one, Jesus uses phileo. Yes?
I'm going into a little rabbit hole, but anyway, there's a TV commercial out there, and I can't remember what it is that they're selling of, but they use the word agape.
Agape. Okay. I'll have to look that up because I have a confession to make. No, we have 3 televisions in our house, and in the last month, they've been on an hour a week. That hour, I watched the YouTube video of our church service to see what the sound quality and video quality and all that. I don't watch TV, I'm sorry to say, but I'll check it out. I don't know what the product would be.
I don't know if it was an insurance or something. I think it was. And I've seen it more than once, so if I see it again, I'll make a note.
Okay. Anyway, so the first two, Jesus says, Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me without condition? Peter, on all 3 of them, answers with phileo. I conditionally love you. Okay, I mean, understand, they're having a conversation, most likely in Hebrew or Aramaic, where these don't necessarily exist, these conditions. But when John writes it, John puts that in there for a reason. Do we love God unconditionally? I didn't say should we. Do we? And by the way, you can all, at home here, you can all answer no, because we all know we don't. We let things come between us and God. We let things divide us off from God. At one church I was at, we put in a television monitor because we were doing contemporary worship. That way we could put the words up on the wall. And we had a couple of families leave because the TV doesn't belong in the sanctuary. And I said, it's just like the bulletin. No, it's not. Well, anyway, and so for a while they didn't go anywhere. Then they went to a neighboring church, and I felt better. I mean, I kept trying to convince them they needed to get back to church, but they had allowed, for a time, that condition of a television to divide them off. And by the way, in contemporary churches, that's a big issue. Not the television, but the newer form of worship. It is not appropriate, it's not worshipful. It may not be for you, but it may be for someone else. Quite frankly, and I'm going to make a confession to all the Facebook listeners and that, I don't live on Facebook. I go out there, I check the videos, I may check my feed. If there's people that have birthdays, I try to say, hey, happy birthday, but I don't live on Facebook. I know people that they're logged in from the time they get up till the time they go to bed. I can't imagine that being my life. So there's different ways of living. And I'm not going to criticize somebody who does that. But don't criticize me for not being that way. And so, by the way, I love traditional worship. But I can also do contemporary worship. Because I can see some benefits to it. For the lifelong Lutheran, they love the traditional. For somebody who's new to Lutheranism, it's not always comfortable. We have a very difficult liturgy to follow sometimes. Peter, and by the way, I think John does this when he's writing his gospel, because at this point in time, Peter is still dealing with the question of, aren't you a follower of that man Jesus? Weren't you with him? Wait a minute. Whoa. Your speech gives you away. And then no. Heavens no. Getting stronger each time. Peter's still dealing with that. Am I going to face the sword for Jesus? And by the way, he does in the end. But at this point in time, he's not there. That's the purpose. Jesus asked the question 3 times because Peter denied 3 times. Peter doesn't just walk up and say, or Jesus doesn't just walk up and say, okay, Pete, everything's fine. Let's go back to our relationship. Jesus understands that it has to happen. But Jesus puts 3 tasks on Peter. And we want to talk about those 3 tasks that Jesus stresses. Did I put that?
If you love me, you must feed my sheep.
I'll question the word must. Oh, we got a few verses to go on. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself, went wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. Anybody relate to that? Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. So no, I didn't put that in there. So I'm going to go back to my question. Okay. What aspects of ministry? Okay, so what are the aspects? Feed my lamb, care for my sheep, feed my sheep. What's the difference? What does a lamb get fed? Milk. So he just pour the milk out on the ground and let the lamb come up and lap it up? Or has he got a bottle there or a skin and he's feeding it in? The way I teach the kids at preschool in chapel, the way I do my children's sermon, the way I do the Sunday school is different from the way I preach a sermon, right? If I just preach a sermon at the kids, what's going to happen? Well, that happens to a lot of the oldsters anyway. I see you guys out there. So it's much more intense and intentional feeding the lambs. And there has to be that gentleness there. Caring for the sheep. What does that all entail? Keeping them safe? You pray for your sheep? Keep the big bad wolf away. Well, I mean, and that's part of it. In our world today, there's a lot of big bad wolves, aren't there? You know, I look at some of the denominations that are going through real struggles right now. Our brothers and sisters in the Methodist Church are going through a real tough struggle right now. But how do you care for the sheep? You lead them where they ought to be, where they're safe. You keep them from straying away, right? You make sure they have food and water. If one of them falls down and scrapes their knee, you bind it up, right? So, again, it's having that heart that wants to see the sheep whole, right? So you watch over the sheep. Wait a minute, that one's kind of limping. I got to check that one out when we get back to the fold. That one wants to stray away an awful lot. We got to watch that one, make sure it doesn't get away before we get back to the sheepfold and then get eaten by the wolf. Feeding the sheep, there was an article written, this is back in the 80s. It was written by the Lutheran Church of Australia. The church that does not condemn, neither can it bless. And it sounds like a weird title, but the whole gist of it was part of feeding the sheep is pointing out the error. You're not living the way Christ would have you live, and that's condemning. Paul would call it reproof and correction. But what it is I don't just say, Jesus died for you, Jesus died for you, Jesus died for you. I also say, and Jesus has a life he wants you to enjoy. Jesus has a life he wants you to live. Jesus has things for you to do, and by the way, you're not doing them. And it's hurting the other sheep. If one of the sheep, a male sheep, a ram, is constantly running over and banging into the other sheep, that shepherd's going to take that ram off and make sure that it doesn't do that anymore, right? If people are hurting others, part of that caring for the sheep and feeding the sheep is, you got to stop doing this. So, very specific tasks with the young and the old, and it's surprising the views we get on our Sunday school. Barb tells the story. I do a little explaining, sing a song, and have a prayer, and it's sometimes surprising the numbers of people that listen in. And by the way, the comments don't come from youngsters. They come from oldsters. It's kind of weird. But I'm glad that people are listening in because it's a way of feeding them. And by the way, feeding people today is a whole different ball of wax. We were talking about that at Elders yesterday, and what are other things we could be doing to reach out to our people? How can we be more intentional in being connected with them and in contacting them, and how can we live these out in the life of the church? And so, but those are the aspects of ministry that Jesus stresses to Peter in John 21. Question 4 is, and I'm going to leave you with that one as we close out. For personal reflection, sharing is optional. This week I want you to think back over your years as a Christian. Note one or more instances where you saw these qualities exemplified in your pastor. And how was that a blessing to you or to someone you know? When did you see one of those qualities that Jesus stresses to Peter? When did you see that in a pastor that you had, and how did that help you? Or help someone else? So, be thinking about that. You can share if you wish, but like I said, it is for personal reflection, and sharing is optional. And we'll continue with 4 and 5, question 4 and 5, next week. 11:11. Need to roll the dice. I don't do that, by the way. Any questions? No? All right, so let's close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, you call men into the ministry to care for your sheep, to literally carry them on their hearts and on their minds. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they're not everything that they could be. But Lord, you use them in your ministry. Do not let them be discouraged, but help them to be encouraged in order that they may encourage others. Help them to know that you live with them and dwell with them, and that you will lead and guide them. And may their congregations be blessed by all that you do through these men. May the qualities that they see in these men that you lift up be exemplified in their lives as well, as they care for their fellow travelers and fellow believers, as they reach out and share the faith, as they live that life of love to one another. Help us to support one another and to uplift one another and to encourage one another. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. In his name, amen. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being online. We'll continue next Thursday. Sunday, we continue with the book of Esther. 10:30 Sunday morning. We'll be in chapter 6, verse 4. So you can join us on Sunday. We look forward to it. God bless.